Paul, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thanks for having me on. I appreciate it.
I'm excited to have you on. I know we're going to have a really nice conversation here, and I'm looking forward to getting to know more about you, hearing it from you instead of reading about you, and also to the listeners of what they're going to gain from what we will be discussing today. So, as always, my listeners kind of know the kind of gist right off the bat. I kind of keep it very routine. How did you get into what you're doing today? Like, what inspired you, or what happened in life that kind of, was it just a one-way directed kind of path, or was it something that I call it the pinball effect, where you just bounce around and then you're like, oh, this is my purpose. Here's what I'm here to do.
Yeah, no, that's a good question. And I wish I had a succinct answer that would evidence that I had planned all this from the beginning, but that's simply not the case. And I have my views on planning are such that I picked this up from somebody else. Make your plans in pencil. It will be easier to change when circumstances change. So, but I had a 30 plus year career as an entrepreneur. I was a lawyer for a whopping 2 years. That didn't take, but I enjoyed the experience. Then I was in the small business world, and I started several businesses in a variety of different industries. And that's an all-consuming process, and it can be kind of a lonely process unless your company grows to be hundreds of employees, in which case you're no longer a small businessman. And my wife and I, we have three kids. They're all adults now. And we got to a point where the youngest was moving out of the house, becoming empty nesters. I was too young to retire, but I was too tired, frankly, to start any new businesses. Emotionally tired, physically tired, out of ideas, looking for something to do. So I did what a lot of people do in my situation. I consulted, or I became an executive for hire. I did that, met some great people, but still I found that I couldn't see myself doing that for the next 20 plus years. So I finished a consulting gig, and I was reading a book, or I'd finish a book and I'd go, wow, what a great book. Or I'd finish a book and I'd go, it wasn't so good. I could do that. And so I think my wife got kind of tired of hearing me say that. So she said, you need to either do this or just, move on. I'm tired of hearing you talk about it. So I kind of said, okay, I'm going to do it. And so I set out to write a book, and then I get in and I joke, I now have a lot of respect for people who wrote the books that I arrogantly termed as not very good. It's hard. It was very hard. Took about 3 years. I continued to consult a bit, but after I finished it, it brought me such a sense of satisfaction that it made the next decision very easy. And that was, I'm an author, and I'm now committed to doing this. And I'm working on book 2, and I'm now doing everything one must do to be a self-published author. So that's sort of a long answer to how I got here.
I love that. Yeah, writing a book's it's a fun journey, I must say. And your book's called The Blood in the Low Country. You mind just telling me a little bit about it? I love the name. I know you're a Southern storyteller, so you mind diving in just a little bit on that?
No, not a problem. Thanks. Born and raised in Atlanta. Circumstances sent me out to Phoenix, Arizona after law school, and my wife and I spent 30 plus years there. But one of our daughters attended college at Charleston, and so we fell in love with the city visiting her. And we were, getting to the point where we envisioned being empty nesters. So we bought a small place in Charleston, and we just fell in love with the city. So when it came time to write a book, some of the advice that anyone will pick up is, write what you know. Well, I knew what it was like to grow up in the South, and and everything that goes with that. And I just loved Charleston, and it's the type of city. Frankly, it's almost a character in the book. It's got such charm and history and personality that setting the story here was an easy decision. The story itself is pure fiction. It is a murder mystery, family saga set in Charleston back in the 1970s. and just dreamed it up. And it's gotten really good reviews. But the title, Blood in the Low Country, low country is a term that's used to describe the coast of Carolina, South Carolina, and a little bit into Georgia. And it truly is low country. I mean, you are a lot of marshland, and low country can connotate a certain type of food, a certain culture, etc. So low country describes where the book takes place. Blood is intended to have two meanings. One is murder. There is a murder in the book. It's not glorified. It's not glamorized. It happens off scene, but it's a big part of the book. And then blood as in family, blood in the low country, because we've got some family dynamics and some stuff from the past that reaches up and shakes up the lives of people today. So that's how we came up with blood in the low country.
That's cool. I didn't know that. See, now I learned something new here. And talk a little bit about your struggle, like the challenges that you faced. You said you had a lot more respect for somebody who wrote a book compared to before. What was, besides just reading the book and being like, I could do that, that's a piece of cake. Right. What are some of the big things you learned as you wrote your own book? For people who are looking to maybe write a book or have thought about it, or some who may be like naive, like I wasn't at one point, like piece of cake. I can stream some up 1, 2, 3. I do it all. I do
right.
very, very similar stuff like this already. Be very easy to do. If you don't mind sharing.
Not a problem. So I wrote fiction. Nonfiction is different. I like to think I'm not an expert in anything, so there's no way I could have written a nonfiction book. So I write fiction, and I think quite simply the hardest part about it was you put yourself out there. It is a scary process. You're going to write a book. You're going to put your name on it, and you're going to tell family and friends and total strangers, this is my book. And some of my long-term friends said, Paul, I was afraid to read your book because what if it was just awful? What would I say to you? I mean, and so there's a bit of a fear that you're going to just fall flat on your face. So overcoming that, is an ongoing challenge. In terms of the actual mechanics of writing a story, for me, I had to go back and relearn so much. I mean, I was a finance major in college. I had to go back and read books and blogs on perspective, point of view, storytelling, the elements of a story. And what I decided to focus on was storytelling, story engineering, how to write a page turner. So from a technical perspective, that's the way I approached it. I like to think in the words of Harry Callahan, and a man's got to know his limitations, So I know I'm never going to be a Hemingway, so I have to focus on what I can do. And it may not be the most beautifully crafted sentences and paragraphs, but I can learn to engineer and build a page turner. So that was the approach that I took.
I like that. I love how you brought that up, because it's like, I've written 2 books. They're in the nonfiction world, but it's I'm not a writer. I'm not grammatically. Yeah, that's not my strength whatsoever. I'm more of a science, math, different health element kind of concept mindset. So when it comes to those things, I can do that all day long. But putting it into flow and being able to
right.
Grammar more than anything, I'm like, you're going to see a lot of mistakes, but thankfully there's an editor for that, which makes it a lot easier, right? Because one of the things I'm looking to do next in one of my journeys is write a book that is fiction, but tail the story to a meaning to where it can give an aspect to some aspect of life, maybe a spiritual truth or just something to help an individual. And that is going to be a task for me, which I'm, again, excited to do, because, you see people write these books like as yourself, and it's like, you can read them and you think, okay, I can do that. But then come sit down to how you went backwards, right? And you started to study storytelling, the element of it all, and how to put that all together. That's something that I think is key. And then you found your strength in there, correct?
That's correct. Yeah. And I got some really good advice. My wife and I, we were commuting, so to speak, between Phoenix and Charleston. Most of our time in Phoenix, that's where we lived, but we were putting down some roots in Charleston. We were introduced to a couple and they were a bit older. They had fully retired, and the husband and the couple had had a full career as a film editor out in California. So he knew a thing or two about storytelling. And so I sit down, we had dinner, and he's like, "So Paul, what are you doing?" And I had just literally that week sat down to start trying to write the book, literally blank sheet of paper in front of me, and didn't even know where to start. I mean, how do you start writing a book? I mean, I get it page one, but literally, where do you go from there? And I explained to him my struggles, and he said, "Stop trying to write a book. Just write. Just sit down and write and stitch it together later. You may have a scene here, you may have a scene here, and you just have to trust the process. If you try to write a book from start to finish, you'll never get there." And I went back, I was working out of a library at the time, and I went back the next morning, I sat down, turned on the laptop, log in, and I don't do anything else. I just immediately start typing. And he was dead on right. And within about 4 or 5 days, I had about 10,000 words. I kept a lot of them, but it just sort of uncorked this dam, so to speak. It's kind of like, how do you get started? You just jump in, and then you stitch the story together. And that was very good advice for me.
I think Jacob Canfield from the chicken, what is it? Those, the soup books, I call them.
Yeah.
He'll always talk about like every morning he gets up and he writes, and he just writes and writes and writes. And then people go, "Where do you write all these books from?" He goes, "It's from my morning writings. I just get up and I just write." And then he'll piece things together. And the next thing you know, he has kind of like a book already there. And then he just cleans it up to make sure it kind of makes it flow. Yeah, that's some good sound advice.
No, that's exactly what I did. And when I get stuck today, I go back and do the same. Yeah, when I get stuck today, I have to remember that. Just free your mind and just sit down and start writing. See where it takes you.
It's so true. I mean, that helped me with my own writing stuff. Where when I was trying to conceptually, try to walk the reader through where I wanted to get them to. And then I was like, okay, none of that. I'm just going to think of a concept and write. And then all of a sudden, within a short period of time, I had the book, and I'm like, wow, okay, is this good? I don't know if it's good. Is it good? And you start questioning, right? And I'm like, maybe we'll see. And then you start sharing it off to friends, and you're like, hey, can you please give me a review? Let me know what you think of this before I put this all together. And they're like, wow, this is a really good book. I'm like, no, you're saying that because I'm your friend. I need truth. I can't have you be a nice person right now.
Well, your editor comes in.
Yeah, exactly. An editor comes in and it starts cleaning up. Wow, this doesn't flow with this? I'm like, whoa, but that's an important part. That's the fun journey of it all. What are some of the biggest things that you see besides the writer stuff that you're sharing here? What else is something that for self-publishers who are looking to do that, would you say is something that you learned that was a big getting over the hump kind of a thing to get writing to be a little more easier for you?
Yeah. Well, okay. So the writing process, I don't know. I think that, at least for me, I didn't know where the story was going. I didn't conceive of a story start to finish, know who was going to live, who was going to die. I didn't know all of that. I had a couple of themes. You mentioned themes. And so I focused on characters and themes. And I had one of the themes in my book was the protagonist is a man named Monty, married, and he has 2 children with his wife. One is theirs, and then one is a son that she brought in from her previous marriage. So you have this family unit, and the father is torn because his wife put such extraordinary pressure on the 2 boys to succeed in order to make her look good, because she's ashamed of her past. She comes from utter poverty. And so we have a husband who is torn between honoring his wife and honoring his children. And he feels like he can't do both. And he's going along trying to do both. And she makes it impossible to do both. But things are going along on the surface, all looks good. And then there is this murder that rips the lives of 2 families completely upside down. And we have a hunt for the real killer. And so we see this character change, Monty, and he goes from being a very controlling type person, thinks he can plan everything, to where all of a sudden he has to really let go and trust And for him, he puts his trust in the Lord, and that's what helps him get through these difficult times. So for me, it was, okay, I need something exciting to happen. This is kind of boring what I've written. So, you have to come up with these plot twists and turns. And then you go, oh, I like that. And so I've got a lot of different plot twists and turns. But when I sat down to write the book, I had no idea where this story was going. I had a rough idea. And then I would always come back to, okay, well, if this happened, how would the characters react? Because if the characters don't react in character to the action, the story isn't believable. You can't have a 75-year-old person, chasing down a terrorist. That just doesn't work. Okay, I use that to exaggerate. So I would come back to the characters, and I would, throw things at them. And so those twists and turns were the aha moment. So I go, wow, okay, that could be interesting. And then I would write. So my writing, I could see maybe 3, 4, 5 scenes ahead, and I'd write that. I'd get through this, and then I'd go, okay, now what? And it could be 3 or 4 days before I got, quote, more inspiration to answer the now what happens question. So, and I'm working on book 2, and I'm experiencing the exact same thing. Now, maybe James Patterson and these folks that turn out, 3 or 4 books a year, they've got it down to where they can see the story from beginning to end. I can't. I have to trust that the story is going to, take shape as I write it.
I love that. And how much is that like? So is it just more of like, because you're saying like story to end, you don't see that. So is it more of like an intuition? It's just a feeling that you're like, one day you're just like, I feel like I'm going to just write this and just see how this goes. And then you look back and go, oh, wow, look, that piece is really well with that story, or that has a nice segue into this kind of a scene or something along those lines.
Yeah, no, oftentimes I'd get to a point and I might have 2 or 3 different ideas as to what could happen next. And I might just sort of sketch them out and what if, and that this happens and this happens. And then sometimes you kind of run into a corner. It doesn't seem to work. And then what I find is it could be later in the day. I mean, I try to do my writing in the morning. It could have been that afternoon. I'm either out running an errand, or maybe I've gone for a run, try to get some exercise, or I go to the driving range. And then all of a sudden I'm doing something completely different. And then I go, and then an idea will pop into my head, and I go, okay, hold on, that could work. So I find that at times I'm trying to force something to happen. It doesn't happen. Sometimes it does, but if it doesn't, I learn to stop beating myself up, because I've had enough experiences where I was able to write myself out of that corner when I got inspiration, later that day, doing something else completely different. I could literally be waiting at a red light in traffic, and I go, wait a minute, hold on, that could work. And so then I don't rely on my memory anymore. I pull over and I email myself what I was thinking. Otherwise, I'll forget.
I don't know how that goes, definitely. How much the lessons that you've been learning through writing a book and all that, how much is that crossover and very similar to your years as an entrepreneur?
It's paying off dividends now. When I first sat down to write the book, I was focused on writing a book. And so now, in my career in the small business world and as a lawyer, though I was only a lawyer for 2 years, I wrote all the time. So the discipline of writing wasn't new. I've always written, and I've always focused on the economy of words. Try to get things to 1 page. In the business world, you don't want to give somebody a 10-page memo. 1 page, 2 pages at most. So I'd always been focused on that. So that wasn't new. Then I found that I'd had some business experiences, with some unsavory people here and there. And so I threw in a little, subplot on some shady real estate dealings, that I'd witnessed in my career. So I could draw on that. But I naively went into the business of writing a book thinking that had not much to do with the business side of it. Well, once I finished the book, and I had my cover design and everything, and I'm now ready to put it up on Amazon and try to figure out how to sell it. Well, good grief. The the business side of trying to sell a book, especially if you're a self-published author, has been an eye-opening experience. And so now I have two jobs, writing my second book and continuing to sell my first book. And, I think if I had done a business plan before I sat down, I would have spent more time on the front end trying to figure out how I'm going to sell this book before I wrote it. But then again, if I had gone through all that, I might have decided it wasn't a very good idea, and so don't write the book. I'm glad I wrote it. It was fun. I've learned a lot. I enjoy it. I'm having success selling the book, but I've learned a great deal about self-publishing, the benefits of it, the opportunities that are available, but also the limitations of being a self-published author. And I think it's important to recognize. I didn't fully appreciate the limitations or the hurdles that are put in front of a self-published author until I'd actually gone through it. It is a challenge.
Would you, for your second book, would you go through self-publishing again, or would you work with like a publisher or something like that?
Well, I'm hoping to land an agent. So, there's a half a dozen of the big publishers. They will not accept a manuscript directly from an author. You have to get an agent, and the agent then helps you get the publisher. And I tried to get an agent. I went through the process. I wrote what's called a query letter. I contacted two dozen or so agents and had no success. And that's a whole different ballgame, trying to get an agent. And then, but if you have a publisher, you have someone that will help you with the cover design and the title, and they'll get you uploaded on Amazon and Barnes and Noble and everything else. But more importantly, they'll get you distribution into bookstores. They have sales reps who go into the bookstores, the independent bookstores, and say, these are our authors. This is what we have this season. So when I had no success with the agent, the second route was to go directly to smaller publishers, and of which there are a great number of smaller publishers or niche publishers. And they advertise that they will accept a manuscript directly from an author, that you don't need an agent. They still would like if an agent brought it to them, because that's at least one person who's vetted you and vetted the book. So I tried that, and that's a whole different approach. I decided to self-publish because these smaller publishers, they take a long time. You still have to contribute some money to the process. And then I'm impatient. I'm not proud of it, but I'm a very impatient person. And they're like, well, Paul, it's going to take us 1.5 years to get your book out. I'm like, are you kidding me? I can get this thing out in 3 months. So I ended up self-publishing. With book 2, I'm going to go back out and try to get an agent. And I'm hoping that based upon the sales of book 1, and they'll see what I've been able to do, that I'll have a better chance of getting an agent. Because self-publishing, you will get your book, you'll get it bound, you'll get the cover designed, you'll get your ISBN numbers, you'll get everything that you need to be on Amazon. And then you can get into, there's another big publisher called Ingram Spark, and they'll help you get into bookstores and Barnes and Noble. But it's one of those things you go, great, I'm on Amazon. Within a week, everyone's going to know, right? Well, of course not. I mean, there's 4 million books published a year. So the Achilles heel of self-publishing is distribution into bookstores. It's virtually non-existent. I go door to door here in the southeastern part of the country. And then if you're on Amazon, if you don't know your way around social media, you will learn your way. 1.5 years ago, I was not on Facebook. I was not on Instagram. And now I'm on it 2 to 3 times a day, posting, blogging, advertising, Facebook ads, Google ads. I have an advertising team that helps me. So a big part of my job is advertising and trying to spend that dollar wisely and see if it's generating book sales. So I have embraced the business side, but I have learned it along the way. It has been trial by fire.
I totally know how that feels in many different ways. And it's been It's the one thing I kind of like too, because I'm kind of like you. I mean, I'm patient in a degree. I love like a systematic plan and creating it and then trying to, hopefully it goes that route. Most like you said earlier, right?
Right.
Write your plans with a pencil because you're going to need to erase them.
Right.
It's easier to erase, which is so true. Um, but then there's that like, because like for me, my second book, I was like thinking about what I wanted to write, and all of a sudden it just struck me one day, and I was like, okay, that's what I'm writing. And I just went to writing, and then I was done very quickly. And I was like, okay, let's get that out there in 2 months.
Right. Exactly.
Right. I want it out. I want it done, and I want to move forward. And some people are like, well, there's the business side. I'm like, yeah, I totally know it. I could save 6 months, market it, do this little sneak, I can do all that, and that's fine. I go, for me, it was more just, here's another book I've written, put it on my shelf of writing books, because I have a big goal of how many books I want to write and get out there. But it's one of the things where like I've followed some people where they've written 4, 5, 6 books that no one even heard of before their one book finally struck. And then all of a sudden, all those old books they wrote got extremely popular. Right. And I said, correct, that's probably going to be my route. I said, I'll write many books. And then eventually, once one gets picked up or whatever may happen, I said, then they'll look back and go, oh, wow, look at all the other ones he's written. Holy cow. And then that will take it its course it goes. But everyone has their own purpose and vision, how they want to do things too. But I think that's the one thing I love about self-publishing, how quick you can just make something and turn it around and get, and nowadays it's so much easier. Like you mentioned, Ingram Spark. I love what they do. They even help you get into libraries and so forth. And which works wonders in so many ways, helped me out massively.
It does. I go to an independent bookstore here, and they all want to help me. I go in, I got a local author, a book is set in the region, they want to help you, and they go, how can I order it? And I go, well, it's on Ingram Spark, and they go, oh, great, and so they can order it. So I get sales into bookstores. The problem is I'm the only salesman. And if you're with a publisher, they have a sales team that will then go out. And when I say that's the Achilles heel of self-publishing, the Achilles heel is you are the sales team, whether you're doing it through Amazon or where you're doing it, door to door to independent bookstores, and that is a challenge.
That is, and if it depends, how big you want to scale and where you want to go. Distribution is everything, so it's one of those things where depending how you do that. No, I love that. Kind of same topic, just shifting gears a little bit, because it's talking about, we were talking a little bit earlier about, before we got on, about working alone through the aspect of being an entrepreneur and things along that nature. I'm thinking that's what the context we were chatting a little bit on. Can you explain a little bit of that journey for yourself, what that means? And the journey sometimes of, being an entrepreneur, it is like, I own a couple businesses. I know exactly that feeling of where, you do feel alone, but I'm just curious to see if you could break that down a little bit, and then we'll dive in deeper. I started my first business in my late 20s. And it was incredible how smart I was back then, because you couldn't have told me anything. I'm much more stupid today because I'm smart enough to know I need a lot of help. So back then, I didn't want advice from anybody. You become so immersed in what you're doing, you become the expert. At least for me, I had no one to talk to, but I didn't think I needed anyone to talk to. And so you end up in an echo chamber. And so it's all in your own head. When things are going well, that's great. Sales are going well, the product development is working. And so, you think you got it all figured out. Then you hit some rough patches, and you find you don't have anybody to talk to. And then I was very fortunate. I've had a very supportive wife, but I didn't give her the benefit of the doubt in the early years of marriage. And so she would ask about things. I didn't want to talk about it because I would think, what does she know about what I'm doing? She's over here with the kids all day. I didn't realize how unbelievably the intuition that she has, and sometimes the ability to see through, excuse my French, a lot of the bullshit that was going on, because I'm just so immersed in it. So one of the things I have found, and I found it, it's a coach, and he was a marriage counselor, because you went through a rough patch. I joked that I was diagnosed as an asshole, and this guy confirmed it. But we got through that, and now this gentleman is my coach.
And basically what he does is he listens to me. And I go and he'll go, Paul, what's going on in your world? And I'll talk. He'll put me on hold. He'll summarize it back. And I hear what I'm saying. And odds are, if I don't hear it out loud, I just go round and round and round and round and round. And the challenges, whatever it might be, never really get fleshed out, or I don't see all the sides and all the angles of it. So when I'm talking to somebody, he's not telling me what to do. He's just hearing me. And then I'll hear it back. And I go, well, actually, no, that doesn't work. But through the process of it, I find that my stress level goes down. I have a better understanding of the particular problem, and I have a clear vision of what I need to do. And so when you're in a small business and you're the one that started it and you know how to do every job and you're writing people's paychecks, sometimes there's no one there to go to, or they're afraid to tell you the truth. And so to have someone outside of that can just listen to you and not, as I say, should all over you, you should do this, you should do that, has been life-saving for me. So that is how I have dealt with sometimes the lonely nature of being a small business guy.
No, I appreciate you sharing that. It's so true, and isn't it amazing? I know, like for me, my wife, we work in my chiropractic business together, but people think, oh, you guys work together. And I'm like, no, we work in the same office, but I'm the doctor, so I'm with patients all day, and she's in the front and taking care of operations and movement and how things go. So I'm like, we don't really see each other. So like at the end of the day, we have something to talk about, but it's amazing the insight, some of the deepest wisdom and truths I've ever gotten for whatever I'm going through or need to work through is through my wife. And it's been fascinating because I kind of had similar mindset, like, oh, I have to have a coach. I have to have someone in the profession, or I have to have someone here who can help me. And I do have those people too, but it was interesting because when I started to open up more to her and just share things, all of a sudden it was like once in a while she'll come with this deep, profound insight. And I'm going, who are you? Like, where'd this come from? And she's like, what do you mean? I'm like, she goes, I do have good wisdom at times. Like, I know you do. You're very insightful at times. It's just amazing because when she'll say it, I'll feel it like, oh yeah, that's the stuff right there.
Yeah, no, that's great. That you're lucky. Yeah, no, it's true.
I count my blessings. Oh no, totally.
Yes, as am I.
And but it's one of the things where too, and I think this is more, I don't like to get into genders as much, but like for males, we sometimes we need that outlet. We need to have someone listen to us or be able to share in a safe space, because that's why a lot of men's groups are getting very popular now. Right. At least I'm seeing, where they'll talk about it. Like, we need to know that we're not alone either, right? And the essence of not being alone also means we think our problems are just our problems and nobody else experiences them. And knowing that there's others that go through it too.
Right. So what you're identifying is the fact that sometimes if you don't share your problems with others in a safe place, you can fall into believing a lie. And the lie is that you're the only one dealing with this. And then when you get out and you find a friend or two that you can speak with, and you find out that they're dealing with something very similar, it makes you feel not quite so weird, or like, well, maybe I shouldn't feel so sorry for myself because these guys are all dealing with it too. And frankly, some of them are dealing with it better than me. Maybe I ought to talk to these folks. Yeah, no, I think maybe I'm 100% believer that the genders are different. And those differences are wonderful, confounding at times. But at the same time, you make that's what makes a good team. But I think generationally as well, my father and his father, you didn't talk about your problems. You didn't, no. That wasn't manly. You were stoic. You absorbed it all. And I'm not for crying at the drop of a hat kind of guy either. So I think there's a balance between being too touchy-feely and being too stoic. But I think it's very healthy if you can find somebody who will just simply listen to you and not turn around and tell you what you should do.
I agree 100% with you. And we all need those. So for all the listeners, if you definitely worth having, if it's a coach, consultant, therapist, whoever it is.
Yeah.
So you have 30 years of entrepreneurship experience and so forth. What advice would you give to somebody who's looking to become an entrepreneur? Like if you can like 3 bullet points or one or two, what's the top 3 things that you would be like, hey, here's the things I've learned in the last 30 years that could help you out in your journey. What would that be?
All right. One, don't be afraid. I think fear restricts us so many times. We're afraid to take the chance. We're afraid to jump in. Don't be afraid. And things may not work out the way you envision them. They may start here and you see it going here and you end up over here. Let it happen. Don't be afraid of where things may go. Thing two, um, watch your expenses and your debt. Now, this is old school thinking. Amazon wouldn't be where they were if they had watched their expenses and their debt. It took them 20 plus years to make a profit. So I get it that the world today is a little bit different in the way companies are capitalized, and I understand all that. But unless you've got that money behind you, I mean, even if it's just back of an envelope, you got to know on a regular basis how much you're spending and where your break even is, and be very mindful because debt never sleeps. Your salesmen sleep. Debt never sleeps. And then the third one is be prepared to pivot. You may think you understand the market, and then you get in and you find out that what you thought your customer wanted, they really don't want, but they want something else, and you're able to provide it. Don't be so locked into thinking that you're right that you cannot see what someone is willing to tell you. So you got to be ready to pivot.
I like the pivot one. That one was for me just because I was so fixated on how things should go or how it should be, or here's the path of what I'm going to create and just make it happen. And then, you get there and it's like, maybe it's not working and you want to go this way. And it's like, no. This is what I'm doing.
Right.
That's it. And
Right.
then until you learn to pivot, and I've learned over time, we have a chiropractic principle that with chiropractic helps the individual be more adaptable and fluid to life. It helps you adapt easier to situations and not overwhelm the nervous system. And I was like, oh man, I can't believe it. Me, chiropractor, is thinking about that now, going, hold on, you got to adapt to your situations better. It's a simple principle that we teach and share. I'm tearing the patients all the time this, and I'm like, oh yeah. Maybe I need to look at things a little differently. Maybe maybe it's going to be a different road for me, right? Because again, I had cultural programming, and there's also programming in how success looks like as a chiropractor. So all those things were fixed into it. And then once you break away from that, so that's why when you said prepare to pivot, I'm like, yeah, that's a good one.
No, we had one of my businesses. We had some technology that would allow us to protect structures from earthquakes, and so we would protect network server racks and flooring systems, and so the ground could shake, and whatever it is you wanted to protect would stay relatively still. Okay, so we're back in Phoenix, Arizona, late '90s, and we're calling on a company that manufactures very large pieces of equipment that are used to polish silicon wafers, big 6, 8, 12-inch wafers at the time that are then cut up to make chips. And so we're trying to pitch them on the need to protect their equipment from earthquakes because a lot of their equipment was sold into Asia, the Ring of Fire. So we have this meeting with this product engineer, and we get there and he says, I have to cancel the meeting. And I'm like, we've had this meeting on the calendar for a while now. What's going on? He says, well, my equipment, it shakes and vibrates so much that unless I can fix this, I'm out of job. And he goes, frankly, between you and me, none of my customers ever complain about earthquakes. Well, my chief engineer, he was my certified smart guy. He goes, tell me about your problem. And so the guy described it and he goes, well, I can fix that. And based upon that one meeting, we developed a prototype. And apparently this problem he had was a problem that was sort of industry-wide in this type of equipment. We did some prototyping. Next thing you know, within a year, we had a whole separate different business division that addressed micro vibration issues in the semiconductor industry, life sciences, microelectronics. And it all started, we're here for one reason. My engineer had the foresight to go, tell me about your problem. And we pivoted. and it was big. So you just never know.
You never do. That's a pretty cool story.
Yeah.
I like that. So one couple questions I have. One of them is, I love asking authors this, so I'm just curious. Is there a purpose, or who was the book that you wrote? This book you wrote, was there someone you were writing it for? Was it just something you just wanted to write? What was that one thing? Well, there could be many, but what is that one thing that, if you could get it down to that, why you wrote the book?
I wrote the book for me. I did definitely write it. And I say that because it did kind of start off as a project. Can I do this? Can I pull this off? And, in my entrepreneurial career, I could have been accused at times of chasing after the shiny object, always boom, new idea. And I'd put some time and money into it, and I'd see what would come from it. And maybe I'd, fund a little bit and bring out other people, but I'd be easily distracted. And, so I'd get a company started, and I'd put the people in there to run it, and then I'd go start another one. Sometimes it would work, sometimes it wouldn't. My wife kept saying, if you're going to write this book, finish it. If you're going to do this, finish it. And so I wrote the book. It was like, yep. And I got to a point where I started it, took a consulting gig, and my book languished. I finished the consulting project, and I was looking for the next thing to do. And I said, unless I go all in, this is never going to happen. And so I said no to a few opportunities. Don't know if it would have happened, but I said no to the interviews or whatever. I said I went all in. 6 months later, the book was finished. And when I got that copy from the printer, my advanced reader copy, and I saw that, I said, this is awesome. So I wrote it for me, and it was unbelievably satisfying. I did not write it to get rich, because that would have been a stupid thing to do, because there's just so few guarantees. So I wrote it for me. Book 2, though, I'm now consider myself an author. This is a business enterprise. I'm fortunate. I don't have to feed myself based upon book royalties. So I get to, but I am putting some money behind it. I'm budgeting this. I'm making sure revenues exceed expenses and such. And I'm writing this book a little bit more with an audience in mind. So I'm it's a different experience slightly. But the first book was for me.
Love that. Yeah, I know how that feels. That's how my first one was. It was a book that I wish I had for me when I was younger. And so then I said, it's for me, but then it's also the gift to help others in that process. Real quick, before we wrap up, how can people connect, find about your first book, how to connect and keep up with where your second book can be released and all that good stuff?
Well, I was fortunate. There's no other paulattaway.coms out there, so I was able to get that domain. So my website is Paul Attaway. That's ATTAWAY.com, paulattaway.com. And there you can find my other social media icons. My Instagram is author Paul Attaway. But at that website, then, I do. I'm doing more blogging. Written a short story. I've got another one I'm coming out with. If you're part of a book club and you want me to appear at your book club, I can do that by Zoom. You can sign up for it there. Books available at Amazon, Barnes & Noble. And if you're in Charleston, there's several bookstores that carry it too. But just go to paulattaway.com.
Awesome. Listeners, they'll all be in the show notes for you. Paul, it was a pleasure. I appreciate you sharing space to share with everyone here at the Mindful Experiment your story, the book, and sharing some wonderful nuggets and wisdom that you shared with us today. I greatly appreciate all you're doing.
Thank you. I appreciate it too.